is Cooper, and today I'm back with a brand new Doctor Who Classic Who review. I did say we'll be going on to season 26 next, but I did put a little bit of a poll out on the community tab asking if you'd like me to review the Macra Terror as a sort of one-off before we delve into season 26 with Battlefield, Ghostlight, Curse of Fenric and Survival. You guys voted for this, so now we're going to be talking about the Macra Terror when I didn't expect to, so that's quite fun. The Macra Terror is a missing Troughton era story in Patrick Troughton's first season, season 4. Missing, I believe, in its entirety. All 4 episodes are gone. Only a few little snippets remain here and there, a few telesnaps, a few actual bits of footage, but not a massive abundance of actual existing stuff other than, of course, the audio. This is the animated version. I watched the animated version in colour because I wanted to have a bit of a different experience with classic Who, especially 60s Who. I've never watched a classic animation before, so I was very much looking forward to it. And yeah, so the Macra Terror. The Macra Terror is a story with the second Doctor, Jamie, Ben and Polly. They basically use a device from the TARDIS to look into the future, to see some sort of thing, land somewhere and sort of discover what it's all about. They see a sort of vision of a big crab claw, one of the big Macra's arms, and they go to investigate. So they end up at this sort of colony. They start investigating, but it's all lovely and it's all positive and everyone's happy and they don't really know what's going on, and then things start to go worse and worse from there. As always, we're going to talk about the first half, last half, the characters, best bits, and then out of 10. So yeah, I'm going to go through that now. The first half of this story, the first 2 episodes, weird but actually quite enjoyable. It's got a very interesting vibe with the city and the people all being really positive, all being very uplifting. There's a weird sort of musical segment towards the beginning of the first episode that I was a bit confused about, but I was totally there for because it had this... It's got a sort of feel of like a George Orwell type story, you know what I mean? Where it's a bit like, you know, it's got like some sort of overseeing eye and everyone's got to be happy all the time. So I wasn't really sure where that was going. I was kind of intrigued with it. There's something sinister at bay and you can tell right from the beginning, and I really like that. There's some great visuals of the Macra themselves, of seeing them a few times before we get properly introduced to them as monsters, and the implications and sort of intentions of who Control really is behind the scenes being revealed at the end of episode 2, I thought was very well done. Because the way I judge, obviously, half a story and the other half of the story, seeing some actual stuff being revealed towards the end of episode 2 on a bit of a cliffhanger was quite nice, and I was like, yeah, okay, I like where this is going. I like the fact that the face of Control, the guy behind that face, is just an old man who's being controlled by these giant crabs, and actually they are in control of Control, who are controlling everyone. The amount of times I'm going to say control in this video, if you had a shot every time you did so, you would be dead by now. The last half of the story, slow as hell, but still fun, I guess. Taking things one small step at a time, managing to achieve something cool, with a nice vibe to it, but, you know, quite slow, quite dragged out and quite dull. Very rare I would say this about a classic Who story. It's usually the first half that I find dull and the last half that I find exciting and fun. This was the opposite, really. That being said, the ending, incredibly rushed. Let's talk about characters. As we always do, we'll start with the Doctor. This time, the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton. I think it's the first review I've done of a Troughton era story. That's quite fun. The second Doctor's brilliant. Absolute highlight of this story. It's definitely not a brilliant story. Certainly not my favourite by far, even of this era. But Troughton absolutely brings his all. He's on top of his game, and it's just great to watch. He's a very interesting Doctor, very wise, very witty, very cunning, but not immortal, which is very interesting. A lot of Doctors sometimes feel like they know everything and it's perfectly fine because they're totally in control of every situation. There are a few times in this story where the Doctor gets trapped and you're like, actually, if someone else didn't get the Doctor out of this situation, the Doctor would have died and turned into John Pertwee right there. And it's like, it's weird because it's sort of like, I actually quite like the Doctor being in a little bit of peril, not feeling as if, oh yeah, well, he's going to get out of it because he's the Doctor. I like the idea that it was just like, yeah, he could actually die here. There's actually some tension. There's actually some threat. But I think by the time that started happening, I was already like more than halfway through the story and I was just like, please hurry up. Which we'll get to in time. The story really drags, but we'll get to that. The second Doctor, though, absolutely brilliant. Definitely sounds like he's in control when he's, you know, in the room. He's commanding the room. He's commanding the attention. All eyes on him. But I like the fact that he's also not immortal at the same time. That's also quite fun. Jamie. Jamie. Let's talk about Jamie. My favourite companion of the 3 presented here so far. And I do say so far because it's only the second Jamie story I've seen. I really love his contributions to the sort of actual story itself. He felt a bit front and centre despite not really being on the team as long as Ben and Polly. Obviously he was introduced in the Highlanders, so that was actually kind of interesting to have a relatively new companion, but he was totally like centre stage. Like, he was the companion doing the good job, doing the right things, and that was really good. Talking about Ben, probably my least favourite of the three companions. Totally fine. Again, this is my second story I think I've seen him in. The other one was the 10th Planet, so again, very different dynamic. I like him as a character, but it's kind of hard to tell when he's brainwashed for 90% of the story because he's not himself, so it's hard to judge him as a character. I like what they did with his character, you know, actually giving him something to do, because again, the way you look at it, and I have to compare different eras, this is a TARDIS team of 4 people, similar to the Whittaker era, and I do criticise the Whittaker era based on its merits of not being able to make everyone feel useful in this. In this story, everyone felt useful in some way. Ben was brainwashed, Jamie was actually doing stuff, Polly was being Polly, which was great, but she was doing stuff. You know, everyone felt like they had a decent role, and not just a line of dialogue, they had an actual decent progressive role in the story, which is interesting. Even Ben, who I wasn't too keen on personality-wise, still did quite a lot for the story. And yeah, Polly, a typical screaming 60s character, bit of a stereotypical type role, but in places still very enjoyable and definitely served the purpose of the plot. Let's talk about the Macra slash Control, the big monsters of this story. I actually kind of like the Macra, stylistically. It makes me even more happy watching Gridlock now, obviously knowing that it's the same monster after all these years. That's quite fun. I like the Macra. They're not the biggest personality-wise because they are just giant crabs. And, you know, the idea of them controlling a sort of civilization through this sort of video face thing is really kind of freaky and weird. And I actually quite like how it was basically the Doctor versus the people that were being not controlled, but almost like slightly brainwashed into believing that the Macra don't exist and they're not a real thing, the Macra. The control is all, it's like control is God, basically. But God's being controlled by something you didn't know. And it's a really interesting concept. Picking apart the visuals, the Macra looked incredible, but that's because I watched the animated version. We're going to talk about animation in just a bit. I really liked how the Macra looked, but they did look too good. Stewbag had an incredible review about the Macra Terror animation, which you should definitely go and check out. I agree with what he said in the set that it looks too good in the sense that the original audio was audio taken from the episode where the prop for the Macra was like a little thing with like a guy with a big crab arm stick, like jabbing someone or grabbing someone for it. This is incredible. The crabs are enormous. They're picking Polly up and it looks incredible, but the audio almost doesn't match it. So it's a bit unfortunate despite how good it looks. But yeah, it's a sort of an odd one, but if you want to see more about that sort of thing in terms of comparing it, and basically Stewbagful has a great review on it and you should definitely go check that out, and it sums up a lot of my feelings towards the way the animation's done in terms of faithful to the original. I like what it did, but it almost doesn't feel right and it doesn't feel like it matches. Talking about animation, yeah, my first ever animated classic story that I've watched, I actually really liked it. I thought it was very well put together, and, you know, I do like the Troughton era from what I've seen so far, which admittedly isn't very much. Again, like, I watched Tomb of the Cybermen recently, really enjoyed that, and I sort of enjoyed this the same amount, but I like how the animation didn't really detract from it. I was watching it as if I was watching any other Troughton era story. Now, no, I didn't watch it in black and white. I did watch it in colour. That's because I wanted to experience it in colour. And I feel like that's not a bad thing, you know? I wanted to watch that as someone who, you know, consumes media in different ways to other people. It's perfectly fine. And I sat down and I watched it and I really enjoyed it. Some of the visuals were really incredible and the animation really helped with that. Of course, stuff that wasn't possible in the 60s. It's great to have this episode genuinely looking just incredible. It just looks brilliant most of the time. I don't know what else I can really say about the animation. It was smooth. It was convincing. Sometimes it didn't match the audio too well, but it was good enough, you know what I mean? In terms of best bits, I have a few little notable things to talk about. The opening was fantastic. On the colour version, the opening was in black and white. You had an opening shot of the TARDIS and all that sort of thing and flying through space, and it just looks incredible. Like, it really just looks fantastic, and I have to praise it for that. It was a very interesting opening that really drags you into the story and it gets you really excited. I don't know whether this was in the original version or not. I don't think it was, but the sort of black and white segment was before the title sequence, so it's a pre-title sequence type thing, like a cold open, which is interesting. You get that in New Who. I haven't really seen that in Classic Who, so I don't know whether that was in the original or not. Presumably not, but I like that inclusion here of changing it up a little bit. It made it feel a little bit more complete in a way, so I did quite like that. The scene of Polly getting taken by the Macra, despite not matching too well with the audio, was really exciting to sort of watch. It looked visually fantastic, seeing these giant crabs in these sort of long, dark, sort of outdoor streets in this big old city, and it looks just incredible. It just really looks great. And I think that's one thing I have to take away from this story is all the visuals are bloody fantastic, like genuinely creepy 60s, but at the same time, because of its animation style, very, very nice looking and very praiseworthy as well. And the Macra reveal of the control room, not specifically the Macra being in control and the Macra visuals reveal, but the reveal where the Doctor takes the pilot to the little window where they can see the Macra in that room, chills. It was creepy. I didn't like it. It was like, just the way they were all, these giant sort of insect crabs sort of things were just sort of at controls using computers and talking through things. And it was like, I really, that made me feel uncomfortable. And I thought, that's what it's trying to do. That's what the story's trying to do. And it got to me and I was like, oh, actually that works really well because it does the trick, And yeah, let's talk about overall. I've got issues with pacing, as I probably mentioned. This story is way too long. It's, and it's only 4 parts as well. This could have easily been a 2-part story. Easily. It drags so much. Not just the last half, but the first half as well. This story is good. Don't get me wrong. I really enjoyed it, but there's big, strong elements that take out with the pacing, and it just makes it totally I don't want to rewatch it. I do not want to rewatch it. It just seems like, it's too much of a task. I don't want to sit and rewatch through the entire story because it just takes too long. You can get from point A to point B of this story in much less time, probably half the time, if you cut out some segments. And that's the thing with the audio as well, I suppose, with it not matching all the time. There's certain segments where it's just music and a visual of a giant crab slowly, and I mean slowly, very slowly walking towards the camera. It looks great, but I'm like, yeah, it looks great the first 30 seconds of watching it. I don't need more than a minute at this point of just watching a crab walk towards the screen. That's obviously exaggerating, but there's certain elements where it's like, you could trim that, you could cut that out entirely, you didn't need that. And I heard there was actually a scene cut for the animated release. Don't know what the crack is there, but even still, it just feels weird, and I just don't really like it being this long. It just feels a bit crap, because it really could have easily been a shorter story. Even a 3-parter would have cleared up a lot of pacing issues. But yeah, no, I don't really know how to phrase it. It's just sort of a weird one, but it really dragged the story for me, and I didn't enjoy it as much because of that, which is a big shame, Overall, the story in terms of what it tries to do is very, very basic level. It's very two-dimensional, it's very surface level, but it's still enjoyable. It's still creepy. It still has its good and bad moments. It has moments where it sucked me out of it and I was a bit bored, but overall, it's still quite enjoyable. So despite a few negative things and on the opposite hand of a few positive things, I'm going to sort of go towards the middle, and I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10 today. It's not a very high rating for such a sort of classic episode, but I didn't think it was incredible. I didn't think it was mind-blowing. I think when I watch more classic here, I'll probably look back on it and go, yeah, it's probably one of the worst ones out of the lot. Not because of how it's presented. It was presented very well, but in terms of the episode quality and pacing and all these different factors, that just stopped me from enjoying it as much. I rate a lot of Classic Who on rewatchability, and this is not very rewatchable in my opinion. So yeah, 6 out of 10. Yeah. Next week we'll be back with the start of season 26. We're going to start with Battlefield next week, a 7th Doctor story. So I'm quite excited to do that one. It's going to be quite fun. I don't really know where we're going to go from there. Obviously we're going to continue through Ghostlight, Curse of Fenric, and Survival. If people keep watching these classic reviews and keep enjoying them, then I will be very, very tempted to do another season after that as well, but we'll have to wait and see. That's long down the road at the moment, but I'm still looking forward to continuing with this. I'm quite enjoying watching Classic Who and talking about it. I can also watch classic stories and maybe not review them straight away as well, which was what I was intending to do with this, but you guys wanted to see it. It's a bit of a weird one, but let me know what you think. Do you think I should keep going with classic reviews? Do you think I should sort of slow down a little bit? Do you think I should kind of stop for a bit, take a bit of a break? I really want to try and get a vibe off you guys as well. See what you enjoy, see what you don't enjoy, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, that's that, I think. Well, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like, comment below for any more suggestions in the future, subscribe to the channel with notifications on if you haven't already. Check out the Patreon page for some exclusive content, early access content, your name in the description, on the end screen, exclusive Discord server, loads of different benefits here and there. So you can go and check that page out in the description below. And yeah, that's that. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.